How's it going, Bat Family? I hope you're doing good today. Welcome to a brand new The Batman video. Yes, one quite soon after the previous one and the one before that. This is because the video you may have seen yesterday, if you haven't seen it, I do recommend checking it out because I talk about Paul Dano himself, the Riddler, writing a Riddler Year 1 comic book series coming in October. I get into what that should explore and all kinds of things like that. But originally that video was a part of this video, but this video ended up going for a while, so I decided to make it into two separate videos. So this is actually future Boba right now talking to you, and you're about to have a discussion with past me. So with that being said, I hope you enjoy today's discussion. We get into some of, I would say, some of my more excited or excitable talking about topics. I can't really form a coherent sentence right now, but we get into Harvey Dent, you know, all the theories and nods maybe towards that of Joe Chill, and I get into how, you know, that could actually be a possibility. The prototype Venom, or was it Adrenaline, you know, things like that. Will Bruce Wayne come out of his shell, and if he does, how throughout the next movie maybe, with a bit of philanthropy, you know what I'm saying there, but also just Robin, you know, just all kinds of things. So sit back, relax, you know how this goes. Watch this as a podcast format kind of thing, or you can just watch me, I suppose, just talking to the camera, whatever way you enjoy these discussion series videos. Yeah, I just had a blast making it. Like this video if you did go on to enjoy it. I'd appreciate that, especially if you are tuning in for a lot of this video. And yeah, subscribe if you enjoy this video and just let me know that you're enjoying it so we can continue this discussion series at the current frequency it is at post-movie. But yeah, let's get on to past me with question number 1. So shout out to Don John 117 here saying, woohoo, let's go Boba, time to hash out some theories, baby. So technically question number 1 is, okay, this one's super interesting to me. I think I've spoken about it in my spoiler review, but you know, this is the hub, I guess, that these videos for this kind of discussion. So Sam Clark says something that I think is on a lot of people's minds, something that obviously, just like with everything, I can't guarantee here, but I would love for you guys to give your opinions on this as well. Hey Boba, congrats on 100k. Thank you so much, Sam. Do you think the adrenaline or chemical Bruce injected himself with during the catwalk fight at the end is potential foreshadowing or set up for a future Bane? The chemical / canister looked green to me. Perhaps could be an early stage of his Bane juice someone was working on. And also, not gonna lie, found your channel like a month before the Batman was set to come out. And in the hype, binged every video you made on it. So I love the vids. Thank you so much, man. And I hope you continue to enjoy my future videos. So with this, my thought has always been, initially it was, okay, that's adrenaline. Makes sense, Batman and his utility belt. I think it's awesome. It carries in something that if in a dire situation, he's already exhausted, bang, shoot yourself up with the adrenaline, just go like he did in the movie. But no, really. But then it did make me think, technically, yes, it is green. I didn't want to be that fan to technically be like, oh, Venom, you know, because it's green. But the more I thought about it, I was like, you know what? Like, let's entertain this. Because why the hell not? Like, Matt Reeves loves doing nods at that. And when it comes out on HBO Max, I believe there is a label on it that we can pause the screen. I don't know if it's going to be anything substantial, but even just a V-11 whatever would be kind of like, oh, is this a Venom prototype? Is it Viper, kind of like what Gotham, the TV show, got into? That would be awesome. You know, it really would. And, you know, it's also, there's, you know, stories like Batman Venom where he became reliant on things like that. And it's also in the mindset, it's like a learning curve for Bruce maybe. I'm not saying he's reliant on it here. What I'm saying is it's just nods. It could be something like that where he carries something like that and he doesn't rely on it right now. Clearly he only took it to give him that surge of only to be used in an absolute necessary moment. And that was that moment. Arguably, his ribs were broken from where he was shot point blank by the double-barrel shotgun, and he needed that oomph. Like, that's why he couldn't get up. Like, he was not only exhausted, but he was probably struggling, like, you know, rib cage wise to like move up in that moment when Selina was just, you know, in front of him. So honestly, I choose to believe, especially with Wayne Enterprises, it's probably something that might not be safe to take all the time. Bruce understands that. He's a very competent chemist himself, as per the prequel novel. Plus, in this, you know, version anyway, I'm very certain that will carry over from the prequel novel, and Matt Reeves makes it so, as with the world's greatest detective, like, he knows what he's doing. So he probably took an experimental drug from Wayne Enterprises. I'm very sure of that, just like his suit. And you could just say it's adrenaline. I'm not saying it isn't adrenaline. Like, when you shoot yourself up with something like adrenaline, it would give you that kind of surge. I don't know if, like, with the kind of memes that are going around now, you might know. I don't know if it, like, with what Batman did, his eyes kind of rolled back and was like, like that. And he was just, like, really raged a bit. And the way he took that guy down, it was almost, this is probably reading too into it, if I'm being honest. It did seem like he had a bit of strength. It just was like, bam, boom, like that, straight down, slam dunk on the floor. Now, again, the rage as well, it's just nice to read into it as a fan, that with that kind of rage, it kind of does speak larger to Venom. Yes, adrenaline can get you going. It's like, okay, well, you know, I'm ready to go, but I don't know if it would be as accompanied with what we experienced in the movie, with when he, you know, used it in that little port that he has to inject it in his leg or wherever it was. That was something else, you know, and the fact that they made it green and not transparent like what adrenaline is, you know, I believe, if I am speaking correctly here, it is more of a transparent liquid. That's definitely, I know I'm rambling about this, but like, I don't think I would blame any fan, and I think Matt Reeves would entertain the fact it's like, yeah, well, maybe it's not technically Venom, and this isn't technically a nod at, oh, Bane's the next villain, or that Bane will be in this series, but it does set up the world building, as I always say, and there's nothing wrong with that, with how, oh, Wayne Enterprises has a Venom or a Viper prototype, which is the prototype of Venom anyway, that in one day you can see how Bane may get a hold of that, maybe some Wayne Enterprises shipments or whatever, it just gets out there some way, shape or form, like the black market or something, and he takes it and like he becomes reliant on it. And now in this universe, it doesn't necessarily blow you up like a balloon, you know, but it will make you kind of roid rage out in the way that Bruce did, not only giving you that strength, but more of like it's like adrenaline times 10, but also enhances you in a hulking kind of way. And that's exactly what we saw with Batman, and I like to believe that that wasn't just adrenaline spike. That was like, okay, this drug does that, but it also kind of does what Venom does. So the fact it's green, in conclusion, I would say it's a safe assumption to say that it's a nod at Venom. Can't be guaranteed. I choose to believe that he carries something like adrenaline in his pouch, but it's not adrenaline. It is something that is from the Wayne R&D department that he has utilized, as we know for a fact, to build his suit with such bulletproof materials that isn't commercially available in the markets, as per a typical Batman, you know, R&D, and, you know, hey, I'm going to utilize what we've got. And he's just done the same thing here, and it could just be the foundation, the very foundational blocks of the world building of Venom. And it's just nothing more than that. It doesn't mean he's going to do a Batman Venom story. It doesn't mean he's going to become reliant on it. It's just a nice nod that he pulled it out and he has it for emergencies. And I don't think it gets more simpler than that. But I do like to say I concur that it probably is, at least at the very minimum, a prototype. But if it's adrenaline, that's fine as well. I just think, yeah, it's nice that they made it green, and it's like, oh, you know, this could be like a Batman Venom thing, kind of, but not a straight up rip-off adaptation. It's just like a, hey, like, it's complimentary to that. Hey, that makes sense that he carries it around with him. I am going to shut up now and move on to the next comment. So Neglected Visions says, hey, my main man Boba, I'm a big fan. Thank you, dude. Quick question. Do you think the Penguin show will be like a mob movie, kind of like Godfather or, yes-y, no-y kind of thing? I've actually, if I pull something up. Okay, I'm back. So Matt Reeves has talked about this quite a bit, and you know, I definitely feel like it will, like, there's been so many discussions about the influences for Oz in this movie, and even what kind of will be emulated in a type of essence, if you will, for this series. And we have Matt Reeves comment on it, saying that he thought that there was a story in the wake of what happens at the end of this story, which is, as we say, kind of bridges, in a way, the end of the first Batman movie to the second Batman movie, but mainly particularly for Oz. Doesn't mean that this series has got to set the foundation for the Batman 2. It just bridges it in a sense that it's set after the first movie. So technically there is capitalization and development there on some kind of growth in some sector, and that is Oz Cobblepot. And that is also the power struggle within Gotham. And he carries on to say that in the wake of what happens at the end of this story, where there's a power vacuum, and that's why, right now, you see Oz at the end of the movie looking out over the city, standing in Falcone's office and thinking, okay. The idea there was that he has been underestimated by everyone, but he knows. So I said, I kinda see like an American Dream, Scarface, Gotham story. Like Tony Montana, no one thinks this guy can be anything, and he has a brutal desire to prove everyone wrong. And as what Colin Farrell said, we're getting kind of wind that, or he is, that it will be R-rated. So, like, imagine like a power vacuum in Gotham, as per the end of this movie, Falcone's Gone Now, facilitated with a higher rating in this HBO Max show. Hopefully, from what we're hearing, that will be the case. So think even more, like, think Matt Reeves' Batverse, but definitely not for, like, even any kind of kids to see or 15-year-olds. It's like R-rated. Like, this is going to be even more bloody, but I'm so happy that it seems that they're doing that, because it will provide, just like what the Riddler Year 1 comic, while I was so happy that it was Black Label, it allows you to get into the mature tones. And this, with a power vacuum, a kind of, as Matt Reeves says here, a Scarface, American Dream-like story, it will need that. The criminal element and the wannabe kingpins, as we know Oz will be the kingpin one day, will be fighting, and that gets messy. This is Gotham City and the mobsters of Gotham going at each other. So yeah, man, I would kind of agree with you there. And, you know, as per what Matt Reeves has kind of said, that's the kind of influence and vibe they're going for with this HBO Max series. I'm not saying that people aren't excited about this, but I think when it comes closer and closer, people will have a massive hype for it. I don't think that hype is there now. I think it's kind of simmering on the hot plate. For some people, but, you know, like, yeah, I loved Colin Farrell as Penguin, but, you know, in the series, yeah, I'll wait to the trailer to get some excitement. Fair enough. I don't think there's that kind of initial excitement that some properties have just with the announcement of it. Some people are, again, I'm not saying there aren't, but I think when it comes to actually the production rolling and we get some footage, I think people will be going nuts. Because some people are like, Penguin series, man, just wait. Now, 88 Callum asks, how does the wingsuit actually wrap around the batsuit? They never explained it. So this is one of those things where, obviously, whilst this is grounded, it is fantastical at the same time. So, like, obviously, there are some things with this movie that require this somewhat suspension of disbelief. With this one, it seemed that Bruce pulled something around here, just went like that, and the cape or something around it just kind of engulfs him. I'm not saying that it wouldn't be nice to know exactly how that worked, but with some things in this movie, just like how with any kind of comic book movie, but particularly this one, obviously I can't, you know, guarantee. It's like, how is Thor's hammer realistic? Clearly this isn't like the MCU with like freaking magical hammers. This is meant to be more in a believable sense of, yes, it's not explicitly explained, but just with like the bulletproof armor he has, or when you get into the prequel novel, there's certain things that aren't available that Wayne Enterprises has with their R&D or whatever that isn't commercially available, and you have to assume that this cape. And what I like with what Reeves did here is that the wingsuit is still a wingsuit. I know some people are like, oh, I wish they went with Nolan's thing, but to me, I loved the newbie aspect of it because wingsuits are real, and if you imagine a Batman flying over our skies, and with the way that Matt Reeves wants to make it believable in a sense, a wingsuit is that. Like, a wingsuit, you can jump from that and do that. What happened? Yes, I agree. The mechanism with when he just pulled it and it kind of just engulfed him or whatever, it came out. I just put that down to the fact that it's, this is the comic book suspension of, technically, we probably don't have something that could do it the exact same way. It kind of went like that and he zipped it up at the end. But it was believable enough, I think, that if you're a billionaire like Bruce Wayne in Gotham, they didn't go as fantastical as they could have gone, like truly, like where it pops out and it's like a, and he just starts flying with a more majestic looking cape. It was more the mechanism that isn't technically, I suppose you could say, realistic by today's standards, in the sense that it's something Wayne R&D does have. He ripped it, it kind of engulfed over him in the sense, and he zipped it up, but it then became a realistic thing because it's an actual wingsuit. I like that. I don't think we need to know exactly how the wingsuit wraps around to a T, just knowing that this is somewhat where the line blurs of, oh, the wingsuit itself is really realistic, but the way he achieved that with how it's an all-in-one suit was a bit of blurred fantastical to realistic, even though it is reliant upon the theory or, the hypothetical of like, oh, it's just R&D, not commercially available tech, right? I just like how the suit is all practical, everything can be used. It's like the very clear bulletproof plating. But if you want to, this is where I'm not trying to forget, because I am quite a critical thinker as well, but with some things with Batman, like you do just literally have to suspend your disbelief with, as per with Superman, looking literally like Clark Kent, or like with Batman, oh, he's got a cowl, right? It's bulletproof technically, but his chin is available. All those bullets that he went like that with, not one shoots for his face or under his nose and blows a hole through like his like mouth or whatever. No, it doesn't. But that's where it's just like, oh, of course it doesn't kind of thing. You have to be like that. You can be like kind of critical thinking with certain things, or like, oh, there's a plot contrivance that kind of really is predicated off something that was really important. So that's very convenient when it comes to looking at the script or something. That is something that I feel like can be even attributed to, you know, this movie. Not that I'm mentioning any kind of plot contrivance right now, I'm just saying for argument's sake, but with stuff like, oh, Batman not getting shot in the face, or like how the wingsuit exactly works, I believe that is something you can let slide a little bit, given the fact that it is still a grounded world, but blends with that fantastical, and at the end of the day, the character doesn't have a helmet, even though that would literally make more sense. It's the way the character is, and Clark Kent doesn't have a massive helmet either. Like, why doesn't he? If he wants to mask his face, you know? It's just those kind of questions. I know I'm rambling here with this one. You do let it slide. But again, that doesn't mean you can't be critical about other things that can actually be done better. For example, like if there is a plot contrivance that was predicated of something in the movie that just kind of everything falls under. I'm not saying there is, but then like that is like, hey, yeah, they could have done better in that. If they just went about it this way, I don't get why they did that way. But ripping something and like the way you can imagine it just being not commercially available tech that just makes the wingsuit attach easier, that's fine with me in my eyes. Just like how, oh yeah, like, yeah, I know Bruce Wayne has that gap in his face on the cowl, but like doesn't get a bullet through there. It's just like, well, yeah, I know what the nitpick is there technically, but it's just like Clark Kent. Oh, just really Oliver Queen with a freaking domino mask? It's like, wait, we don't know who he is? Just that kind of thing. I do feel like on the suit there are little parts, even on the legs, where it seems like whenever that happens, some kind of mechanism or thing happens with the tech where it just kind of like comes out, or like releases those little tied up bits, or like on the shoulder there's those little bits that like seem like that as well. I think it's all to do with that, but I do agree it feels like there's a bit of like a jump from just pulling something to then just like, oh, like he's in the wingsuit all of a sudden. This one is so intriguing because I mentioned it in the Easter eggs part of my spoiler review, and it's something that like I can't guarantee, but I love with what we know about Matt Reeves and how he said he's included things that he wants the audience to be like, hey, is that who that is, kind of thing. The thing is, people have a different minds here, and I see how it completely works in both ways, and it could just be the way I think about it, if you know what I mean. That makes it seem more sense to me. But I feel like it does make sense, you know? So Rick and Bonnie says, who was the rough-looking guy? Maybe homeless? That talked to Bruce at the funeral. Now, again, a lot of people, when I said that in my spoiler review, are saying, Boba, that's the same guy who was the guy who said vengeance after getting his face punched in by Batman. It's not. And I've got confirmation of that here right on Twitter that you're seeing on screen of Douglas Russell, the guy who was at the funeral scene. Well, first of all, let me just give you the context. If you guys have seen it enough, or even if you've seen it once, you may not remember it very well. But right before Bella Real comes to Bruce, as he's walked into the public memorial for the mayor, which is why you have citizens either side of the railings of the main entrance that Bella and Bruce walk down. As he goes in there, he has a guy talking as Bruce kind of just halts. Bruce is kind of listening to him, and he's kind of bitching about the rich. It's like, they just never, did anything for my daughter and stuff. And then he's like, hey, after he looks at Bruce, don't I know you? It was also, sure, this is where people say for and against it, like, oh, he recognizes Bruce Wayne, right? Sure, like, I'm not disagreeing there. But the reason why this whole Joe Chill thing comes about is because he could also be like, hey, don't I recognize you? Because not only does he fit the casting perfectly of Joe Chill, not only could that be such a weirdly poetic, frustrating thing to witness, knowing if that was Joe Chill, yeah, one person recognizes the other person, but Bruce doesn't quite recognize that that's the guy who killed my parents, even though, jumping to it, as he's walking away, they heavily do that with Robert Pattinson's Bruce, looking back at him as if he's like almost, when you're trying to remember a dream, you almost have it, but then, oh, Bella's still distracting me, so he just carries on walking down, and then he looks at the mayor's kid and keeps on looking at him, feeling bad for him. That's when all that happens. But as he looks back, the guy just disappears like this, in the back, as if he's still fixated on Bruce. Now, that's when, again, somebody could come back and say, yeah, that's because he's like bitching about the rich. And it's like, hey, like, oh God, that's Bruce Wayne, oh God, like the guy who isn't seen much, but a lot of people tend to recognize him still. My argument there is, like, I don't think that guy would be so spooked, and the emphasis of the camera panning in on him as if like he's dissipating like a ghost into the crowd, and then Bruce is almost half recognizing him as he looks back. It's just like, to me, I have so much confidence. I really want to ask Matt Reeves this. Like, was that, I'm not saying it is, you don't have to say it is, but was that a nod to that guy maybe being Joe Chill? And there's so many reasons why as well, why it works. Because, as I said, after that guy's like, I wish I could remember the dialogue perfectly, but he's bitching about the mails, like this, that, and the other, that didn't do anything for my daughter, and stuff like that. Makes perfect sense as to why he's a guy who's desperate, resents the rich, even like to the point of where he years ago would have been that frustrated to have, you know, killed the Waynes. The guy who started the renewal fund, like, he never did anything for my daughter, kind of thing. Maybe that's why he kind of one night got drunk or whatever. As Alfred said, yes, even though there is the theory, like Falcone could have, it was that day that Thomas went to him, right, to say that he's confessing to the police. It was later that day they died. But as Alfred said, could have been some random thug who was desperate for money, who was too quick to pull the trigger. It's never definitively ruled out. So this guy, who's Douglas Russell playing that role, who was, I believe the credit is Bitter Nobody, could easily be seen as a very loose Easter egg to Joe Chill. I know I keep rambling about this, but I just want to keep emphasizing that he turns, after all that bitching, Bruce is like, and he's just like, don't I know you? That's when Bella comes in and says, Bruce Wayne. And then that's like, oh, like, don't I know you? Here's Bruce Wayne. He's like, yes, again, he could be reacting to just it being the Bruce Wayne. But again, the emphasis on how kind of creeped out he is. Like, because like, oh shit, I killed your parents. And the reason why he couldn't put it together straight away, because the last time he saw that guy, who is now a man, Robert Pattinson's Bruce, was when he was a boy, which is why he couldn't put it together straight away. You know? He was a kid in Crime Alley, so he half recognized him. Don't I know you? And the reason why Bruce, I like that emphasis, if this is true, and it is Joe Chill, was starting to kind of piece together, is because obviously that was in trauma. You might not remember the killer's face. It could have been half concealed, but there was something familiar about him, but not as familiar as for what the Joe Chill guy had about Bruce Wayne, and then obviously he had it confirmed to him. But knowing that this could be Joe Chill is so fascinating of a theory for me, and exciting of a theory, because it's like, it's so tragically poetic, because like Bruce was right there, and that guy clocks it together like God. And as Bruce is, you know, walking down the hall and still looking back, he's almost putting it together, but then still gets distracted, so he kind of gives up. The camera pans. Watch it again, you will see exactly what I mean. For that to have just been, as some people say, and I respect this opinion because I could be getting overexcited here, but I do feel like it is 100% a nod at the very least, even if it's not that character, Joe Chill. It's still a nod. It's like, hey, is that person? Even though it isn't. For them to put that emphasis there, and for that guy to be creeped out, it just doesn't make sense for that guy, for anyone to be like, oh, I was bitching about the rich, and oh, Bruce Wayne is here, to be that kind of lurky, weird, and dissipating like a ghost into the crowd. Because, you know, he knows he's done wrong in his life, and whether he regrets it or not, it doesn't really matter. Like, in that moment, he still just really was bitching about something to someone. Bruce learned that it was the victim who survived, who he let live, and it, you know, Jesus, he would react that way. And Bruce almost, I wouldn't say he almost puts it together, but there's something familiar about it to him. And I completely buy that he doesn't fully recognize him, given what I have to mention about trauma, etc., etc., etc. Maybe he had a balaclava on, maybe he had a hoodie pulled up, was keeping his face down. It's not something you'd really put together. Again, the casting is absolutely spot on for what, if I was a casting director, would hire as Joe Chill. And again, Douglas Russell here says, I'm not one of the bitter nobodies that feature at the end of the film. The guy that has the big fight and is unmasked looks, to me, like the brilliant Bronson Webb. Now, this is where some people are saying as well, with regards to how he's a Riddler goon, because I believe the Riddler goons are referred to as bitter nobodies. I still don't think, just because he says he's not one of the bitter nobodies and he is credited as a bitter nobody, technically, that automatically means he's not Joe Chill. I mean, you could argue that he's still a bitter nobody, or like one of the people who is, you know, still receptive to Riddler's message, because arguably maybe Joe Chill would. But other than that, he's confirmed that this is his only scene, is the funeral scene. And again, you could argue that maybe he knew that Bruce Wayne was one of the targets to come. That could be all set up for that, which is why there's such a for and against with this. But I do believe, even if that is the case, that's the very intention. Hey, could just be one of Riddler's bitter nobodies, who actually doesn't appear at any other point, even though people think it is that guy who got his face smashed in at the end, but it factually isn't. But then again, it's played in such a way where you could be like, hey, Joe Chill, the reason why this is a big thing as well, he was never caught. Like, he was never caught. And by the way, even if Falcone did kill the Waynes, it wouldn't have been him himself. It would have been that situation where he hired a low-life thug, aka Joe Chill, to fulfill that contract for him. So I love just the ambiguity here. That's the bottom line here. We don't know for sure who this is, and that's where it lies. I just am one of those who love the idea of, especially with the way the scene plays out, even though there is that for and against with just how he could be one of the Riddler's goons, even though he's not seen again, could be daunted by the fact that he knows he's one of the targets. But again, with the casting and the way it was daunting, I'm just one of those fans who prefers to read into it in that it is totally possible, as since the killer was never caught, that one of the bitter nobodies, or the bitter nobody of the cathedral scene, was daunted because he could have very well been that guy who was never caught, who killed the Waynes in Crime Alley. And when Mayor Bella Real, or mayoral candidate at this point, was like, Bruce Wayne, after he said, hey, don't I know you? You know, he kind of cacked his pants, because the last time he saw him is when he did that. So, hey, could be wrong, but I love the theory, and I don't think I'm ever going to, until Matt Reeves says outright, no, not him. I will always view it in the line of ambiguity of leaning more towards Joe Chill, but can't quite know for sure. Now, up next from Cameron Venables, hope I pronounced that correctly. So, hi Boba, love your videos. I've been here since your Titan Season 2 breakdowns. Also, congrats on 100k. Thank you, man, and thanks for being here for so long. But on the topic of the Batman, do you think in the second movie we will see Bruce starting to come out of his shell and start getting used to his billionaire side, while also maintaining his brutal side of Batman? Yeah, I think there's this misconception that people think, not that you think this, but I just wanted to address it in general, that because he said, like, hope, and that he's a symbol of hope, that people are like, I don't want him to be a symbol of hope. It's just like, no, but you're missing the point. I feel like they're thinking that he's the symbol of hope to the criminal element as well or something when they say it. It's like, no, like, he's a symbol of fear still. He's still going to be, like, pretty savage. He's still going to beat people up. He's still going to be scary. That whole beginning bit where you had the drop head with the mask on, just kind of looking in the corner, oh, is he here? Or is he there? Or is he outside the store? That is still present. So it's just a shame to me that some people's takeaway is that because of the kind of arc that he went through at the end, and again, this isn't you saying that, but lots of people I feel like are taking away, it's like, yes, he's still Batman. The thing about Batman is he is most certainly a symbol of hope to the people of Gotham. Sure, some people might be kind of scared of him in some ways, shape, or form, but like, arguably, the heroic side is a very, very consistent thing to the way that he helps Gotham, and people over time do get to know that and look at the Batman as their protector. But to the criminal element, that's the hilarious thing. If you're a criminal, he's not somebody who you're thinking, oh god, he's my symbol of hope, I hope he saves me. No, like, you're scared shitless of him still. So that is most definitely going to be maintained. I think the brutal side's going to be maintained, albeit that maybe it might be dialed back in some scenarios. But like when it comes to like a fight, like at the, you know, the train station where he had multiple enemies on him and like he used a taser, I think all that's still very much so going to be present. But they're coming out of the shell, like using his billionaire side, I do expect that. Like, I use that word very sparingly when it comes to movies, because I don't go in with expectations, or I don't let any kind of theories influence my experience. So just because I predicted something, if it didn't happen, that doesn't mean, like some people with shows or movies, oh, that means it's shit. No, like, no. But with this one, my expectations or predictions, if you will, is that, like, he will get into more of the philanthropist side of things. You know, I'm not saying he's going to donate $1 billion and start another renewal fund. That could, you know, we've seen how that's been, you know, used for wrong purposes, even though you've got now a new DA coming, who could be Harvey, as we're going to get into in a future question. We've got a new mayor who's, you know, not crooked, she's clean, she's got to be doing the right things for Gotham. I feel like Bruce Wayne, as now he's gone through a bit of an arc, that doesn't mean that he's like, oh yeah, I'm Bruce Wayne now, I'm going to swim in the hotel pool lobby and just frickin' buy your hotel if you don't like that. He won't make that dramatic leap. But I think out of the shell, as you put it, is the right way. He will be out of the shell. He'll be thinking, okay, I can have it affect as Batman now in the way that I literally have identified with my monologue at the end of the movie. I have had an effect, and all of that stuff. But I think he'll be encouraged maybe by Alfred, maybe even of his own realization that, hey, God, all these people are corrupt. The DA, the mayor, like, the freaking commissioner. Hey, now that they're being replaced, hopefully and ideally with good people, even though Two-Face will have that tragic kind of fall, granted, but maybe, you know, as we're going to get into, Two-Face will have some time of actual Harvey Dent goodness. He will think, hey, like, I can, you know, as Mayor Villarreal pointed out, like, your family did a lot for this city and stuff, but you're not really doing anything. But it's like, well, maybe I can. Like, maybe I can juggle Batman. Like, that is the effect that has more of an effect for him, if you will. But now that the city's arguably, I wouldn't say like in a proper better place, because it had, like, as Matt Reeves says, a bit of a breather, but oh god, it's got to get so much more worse. This is like the first breather it's had in a while with Falcone's fall and the corruption and stuff, but like it's still breeding, you know, trouble's always brewing in Gotham kind of thing. He was still thinking, oh, I can help facilitate the new positions, the mayor, the DA, the commissioner and stuff, and do my Wayne side of good impact in the city. We don't know what that will quite be yet, but I would like to see more scenes with Mayor Villarreal, maybe Bruce hosting a charity event, or just, you know, like the announcement of something, maybe like he's going to rebuild Wayne Manor. That might be more for selfish desires, but like he could rebuild it as an orphanage, but he could just rebuild it, and that's where he might stop living in Wayne Enterprises, even though I have absolutely no issue with him living in the penthouse. But I'm just saying, like, he could do some new things that he would have never have considered to do before because he thinks it's bloody pointless. He doesn't have an effect out there, you know. But I think with his wisdom and growth, especially with Andy Serkis's Alfred at his side, I do expect, yeah, just some kind of subtle interest from him. Not straight up like a 180. That would be really weird. It would be unnatural. It wouldn't be organic. But for him to be like, you know, maybe be persuaded by Alfred at the beginning of the movie to do something, he wouldn't be so against it. And that maybe even makes Alfred behind the curtains be like, oh, like Master B is actually considering doing this. And like as Bruce realizes that maybe he can do something after attending an event, maybe he would still be reluctant to do it. Like, Alfred, I don't want to be here. Just like that beautiful kind of moment where he comes out the car and you have those photographers just taking these snapshots of Bruce, and you see that half attempted smile from Pattinson, but it's just like he was also just like he couldn't do it, like, if you know what I mean. I still feel like he'll have that kind of persona where he doesn't want to be there, but he's knowing and saying like he's gonna try and make Gotham better, and he's realizing he can make it better not only through Batman but through Bruce. So he's agreed to meet with Bella and, you know, how he can actually help, because she did say she wanted to continue that discussion later after she paid her respects. That never happened, so we can get those scenes in the second movie. I do expect a slow burn for it. I do not expect him to act like a douche playboy. I think Matt Reeves won't necessarily even go there, by the way. I'm not saying that won't happen, but I'm saying that I can imagine, the way to put it actually, I think I read somebody say this, is maybe more of a Batman telltale. Bruce isn't like a jerky-worky kind of guy, oh yeah, sipping champagne and whatever. But with Batman Telltale, his Bruce is more like, just like the figure that you would imagine Thomas to be in a way. Like, hey, like it's Bruce Wayne. He's not like a douche. He's trying to do things. He's speaking up, you know. He's not like massively political, but he's doing his bit. Like, he's just Bruce Wayne. Again, I can really see Matt Reeves leaning into the Telltale version of Bruce Wayne, and that public side, it's more of just like a stand-up guy trying to make the city better in any way that he can. Nothing too extreme on either end of the Bruce Wayne spectrum, just more of like the middle guy who's, yeah, trying to be a bit more of a philanthropist like his parents does. That's why I say more Thomas Wayne-esque like his father, but not obviously the political side necessarily. But I feel like there's going to be a slow edge and approach to that that we might not even see fully come to fruition until the third movie. And who knows? We really have to wait and see there, but I do definitely expect him to go out of his shell. And I would love to see your guys' takes on this. Like, maybe don't try and just jump to, oh yeah, Playboy. Like, really think about what Matt Reeves would do. And I think, for those of you who know about the Telltale Bruce Wayne, I think it would be more approached with that, but maybe with a bit more hesitancy, because at the beginning he's going to be a little bit more, you know, coming out of your shell doesn't mean you're that confident, you know, to be like, hey, Gotham. He's going to be a bit more timid, but a very early, of what you could imagine an early Batman Telltale Batman, well, Bruce to be like. Up next is from Hola Chow saying, do you think there's time or space for Robin in the Batman trilogy, or would it be necessary to expand the amount of movies, perhaps making a trilogy of trilogies like Star Wars? I do agree that would be the optimal one if you're going to bring in Robin. Like I've always said, if it's a trilogy, which, you know, we're definitely getting a sequel, it seems like it'll be a trilogy, but, you know, if I had an ideal way of doing this, it would be more movies, of course, and that would mean it wouldn't be in the first three, Robin would be later. But say, if you have to do Robin, I would say that it would have to be in the third movie. I wouldn't mind the end of the second movie with, let's just say, Bruce having gone to the Flying Graysons, maybe adopting Dick Grayson. I would want it to be Dick Grayson. But yeah, as far as Robin, God, like, even then, I just think of the third movie, and I just don't know if Matt Reeves, I don't expect him to have years and years and years and years between movies. This Bruce has still got a lot learning himself, but that doesn't mean you should rule out, oh yeah, he can still be imperfect and have a Robin. If anything, that brings in an interesting dynamic, like these kind of conflicts he might have with that casting of a Robin who would be more of a mid-teenagery kind of role, despite what we've talked about before and what they've talked about, you know, Robert joking, saying, yes, but he has to be 13. They're not going to make him that young. I really, really don't think so. It'd be more like, if they want to make him look young, they can have him be like a 20-year-old cast actor, age him down, 16 kind of vibe thing, 17, to make it more grounded and believable, isn't in the ways that I feel like Matt Reeves would follow through. But again, I feel like if you're going to do a Batman and Robin movie, which is, you know, I don't know if this is the Batman trilogy. For all we know, the titles could be like the Batman Chapter 2, the Batman Chapter 3, or it might be like his Planet of the Apes trilogy, where it's like Dawn or Rise and War for the Planet of the Apes, things like that. Do you see what I mean? It could be like, the movies could be like something like the Batman, or like War for the Planet of the Batman. Obviously not, but you know what I mean? That kind of title. So for it to like be like, it could be like the Batman and Robin. That would be pretty dope in a way. I mean, obviously, I think that needs to be polished a bit more. Overall bottom line on this is, I think Robin can be done, for sure. I think it should be done a bit later, but then, if you're gonna do it, you should do it in the third movie. Second movie is a big no-no for me. Like, I just don't think Bruce is there yet. For him to, like, it's still have so much development, despite the arc he went through in this first movie, to then do that in the second... No, the second movie isn't going to be him having a Robin. Like, it'd be very jarring for me, and hard to sell me on in an organic way of telling that story. Whereas the third almost feels timid enough for me to, like, believe in, but, like, it's like, wait, as you can see by the third movie, might be a bit more of a time gap between the ending of the second, where, you know, I think a third movie could work. Let me put it that way. But I would definitely kind of still like more movies, but... The reason why I say, like, this might not be, because lots of people really, I don't know, it feels like sometimes people take issue when I say 3 movies. The reason why I say that it won't be 4, 5, or 6, because they're like, oh, yeah, we want more, like, stop saying 3. I'm kind of like, yeah, like, Matt Reeves could also hand off the directing role to someone else. You know, that happens with movies. But then you have to think of Rob Pattinson, like, I'm sure, and he does seem to love this role, but it's like, that's 2 more movies that will span over the next 6, 7 years. And the 4th, the 5th, the 6th movie, like... The actors needing to be maintaining that, you know, work ethic and things like that. It's just, it's kind of hard to believe. I'm not saying he won't do this. I don't know. But I'm just saying, I can believe Robert Pattinson would do 3 movies. But, and he's even said trilogy. Yeah, I'd be down for a trilogy. Or like, that seems like a cool thing or whatever he said. But for him to be like 4, a 5th movie, 6th movie, that's like a substantial commitment, that is. And I feel like that's more fan desire, kind of being like, oh my god, this would be amazing, rather than taking the kind of grounded, you know, realism sense of view on the movies that will be done. And I think it will be 3 rather than 4 or 5 or 6. I would love 4 or 5 or 6, trust me. But I just feel like they probably want to tell more of an arc over 3 movies. And if it goes into 4, 5, 6, I'm not saying it can't be expanded. That's happening with HBO Max shows and things like that. And you know what? I would be so over the moon if for some reason in several years' time, like, they're like, oh yeah, 4th movie's coming. But a very X to doubt situation. Very much so. But as for Robin, again, just have the last say on this. Can work. 3rd movie, not before then. Those are my thoughts on it. And yeah. Any sooner just would be too premature, in my opinion. Now, up next, and for the last question, just because, again, rambled so long, I will get into other questions in future videos, and there's so much more to discuss. But Abul Sharma says, do you reckon they'll introduce Harvey Dent into this universe to stop corruption and set him up with Maroni to create Two-Face? Would love to see you do some more fan castings. Yeah, that's something I might do in the... Well, we will get to that. I have some videos planned. Love your vids, man. Congrats on the 100k well deserved. Thank you so much. So, Harvey Dent, I just think, yeah, even though, for example, it doesn't guarantee just because Gil Colson died that Harvey would be the next replacement. However, I do lean that way. Whereas, the reason why I mentioned that is because, for example, just because Pete Savage is dead doesn't mean Lieutenant James Gordon is the commissioner. I'm pretty leaning towards the fact that Jim won't be the new commissioner. I mean, I could be wrong. But let's just say that's not going to happen. But Harvey Dent, is kind of often, this kind of youngest district attorney, or like attorney to become the district attorney of Gotham. So like, I do feel like, given, let's just say, and I always say, let's go off the assumption of 3 movies. You have 3 movies of finite time to like decide what you want to do. That's why I kind of don't envy Reeves as much as I do at the same time, and I would love to be in his situation and create and help create this world. But God, the pressure of like, how do I utilize this? How am I going to include the characters I want? Should I include this? Would that be too, there's so many things to consider. So with Harvey Dent, I think you can do that. With Gil gone, let's get Harvey in. That doesn't mean, and you're asking me, do I reckon they will? I would say I reckon they would bring in Harvey as Gil Coulson's replacement as Gotham's district attorney. And not only that, with what we've already discussed this video, it could really help facilitate the kind of arc that we have with Bruce Wayne, with what we were going over earlier, with him being that kind of Batman Telltale Bruce, but a very early kind of more timid version, but one who's willing to be a bit more out there in philanthropist mode, unlike that of the first movie. But then, as I kind of was leaning into, he works with Bella a bit more. But and then imagine like Harvey Dent, he becomes friends with him, and he comes and crosses paths with someone like Harvey, the new district attorney, because as I mentioned with, like, let's just say he hosts some kind of charitable event or something, you're going to meet important people, socialite kind of people, or people in important positions like the mayor. But also she might be like, as they want to continue the discussion, as I went over earlier, because she wanted to pay her respects, she's like, hey, I want to introduce you to someone, Gotham's new DA, Harvey Dent. That would be awesome. It'd be like, and they get on, and it would make that story, like, we might not see Two-Face happen. I'm not saying it will, I'm not saying it won't, I'm just saying I definitely think it shouldn't in a second movie. I think if you bring in Harvey in a second movie, have him as Harvey for the whole movie. Don't do the Dark Knight thing. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying where we see the kind of White Knight Harvey Dent, and then it just goes into Two-Face. I mean, I would love it, but I'm just saying, no, save that for, like, if you want to really do it, do it in the third movie amongst other villains, because as I say, I feel like Reeves has got to do multiple kind of things, just like I had in the first movie, Riddler, you have Colin Farrell's Penguin, you have freaking John Turturro's Falcone. I'm quite insistent that I feel like he's going to do multiple things. That's why I do feel like there can be a bigger villain in the third movie, but you can still have Two-Face in there somehow. Who knows? But I feel like in the second movie, if you're bringing in Harvey, and in this kind of like off the top of my head vision of Bella introducing the mayor, introducing the new DA to Bruce Wayne, maybe at a public occasion, and they become buddies, it just helps serve that kind of story of Bruce Wayne helping out that much more, but with this kind of context of where we know these characters will be at. Like, obviously Harvey Dent hasn't had the acid situation yet, or the moniker of Two-Face, but we know where that's heading one day, and we know, and it's even more bittersweet because they're such good friends, and doing all these other things with helping fix Gotham, doing it the right way, prosecuting cases and not taking 10 grand to, like, not prosecute a case like Gil did. As for Maroni, I know what you mean there, like, the kind of a court situation where acid is thrown in his face, like, who knows, because I think in a prequel novel, and this is just something that doesn't have to be beholden to the prequel novel, it's like, when he actually finally went down, Alfred and Bruce were like, oh, but will it stick this time? Because he always managed to get off those charges. Like, he's been in trouble so many times before, like where anyone would have gone to jail, but because it was Maroni, he managed to get off of his lawyers. There could be a situation where, oh god, Falcone's gone, Penguin's the kingpin, but Maroni, there's some weird opportunity that where he's like might be getting off on a technicality, but like Harvey has to handle that case in court, and it still fulfills that kind of acid thrown in his face moment in the middle of court. That would be cool. I don't think, though, yeah, I mean, as you say, to set him up with maybe later down the line with a Maroni thing to create Two-Face, but yeah, I do reckon, ultimately, to answer your question, they would introduce Harvey as Gil's replacement. If they don't, I'm just saying that's where I think they should go. I don't think that's too soon to be like, oh, next DA is Harvey Dent. If anything, it makes it more believable, because for Gil to die, and then for another DA to come in, and then that person to die eventually, and then, oh, it's Harvey. That could still be believable, because you could argue, oh, Harvey Dent doesn't even have to come into this series. Maybe it's DA Gil Coulson, he dies, DA replacement someone else, but we meet the attorney Harvey Dent, and that's all he is, this whole trilogy. But again, I think the more tasteful thing is to have the new DA as Harvey Dent, for sure. But Two-Face or not is something I wouldn't mind tiptoeing around and not having for quite a while. It'd be super cool for it to be teased like, oh, he might have like a line if we do have Harvey introduced talking to Bruce or Bella. It's like, oh, Maroni's kicking up some noise. We might have to see him in court again. And it's like, that might not happen now or even in the next year. You know how long court can take sometimes. But we know what will happen by the end of that, with maybe him getting the acid chucked in him in the middle of the courtroom. That would be a pretty cool nod to that source material there. But guys, that is absolutely everything we're going to cover in today's video, so let me know your thoughts on everything we discussed. I love talking about this stuff with you guys, and the fact that we get into it so in depth, and now we have the context of the movie going forward into the next movie. You know, this is going to go on as we get into that next movie, on top of all the news updates for the sequel and obviously the HBO Max spin-off shows. So other than that, I'm just going to love you and leave you. Follow me on Instagram, follow me on Twitter. That's my most active place there, but I do also have a Discord server. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you, Bat Family, in the next video. Goodbye.